Welcome home. This is Audio EXP for July the 12th, and the episode title is What the Heck? Imperial Media Productions won the RPG Publisher Spotlight this month. I'm in touch, and we are getting the Q&A ball rolling. It's been a week of big RPG news and Prime Day. Let's start with the latter, as I am a little disappointed in the lack of TTRPGs in big hecking 4-day Prime Day. We ran a mega thread and we added sections of manga, graphic and light novels to support what could have been a standalone post all about tabletop RPGs. In practice, I found only Renegade's Hunter the Reckoning in the true Prime Day sale, at least here in the UK, and that deal might be due to the changes coming to Worlds of Darkness as well, and we'll get back to that later. However, I did find other TTRPG deals which I added to the mega thread because, look, a deal is a deal. And those deals included Marvel's Multiverse RPG, some Pathfinder, and a Hooded Man RPG based on the old BBC Robin Hood series. My best buy in the sale was the Snapgrip ShiftCam Classic, which I look forward to using to convert my smartphone into something easier to use at conventions. 2025 was the first Prime Day in which reviewers could buy, receive, and then review items all in the same sale. And while I was doing all of this, where was Bronwyn, you might ask? Well, she's been having a honeymoon break after getting married, but there are signs she's coming back to blogging, and you can find them on the blog with her review of her rather spectacular wedding dress. I am not going to try and pronounce the brand, but it was an armoured themed dress. And the review has photographs of Bronwyn and Myrtle's wedding waving a sword around behind one of our local castles where the event took place. I am going from weddings to combat. There is no connection. We had a great guest post from Alexander Atoz of DragonEncounters.com on how to make combat interesting. There are some fantastic tips in here, and I especially like the balance between having surprises but not having bosses mysteriously only start to use important powers in the very final stages when they could and should have been using those powers from the start. It's odd though, isn't it? 50 years of D&D and we're still asking, how do we make combat interesting? The next combat topic is more important, and it's combat of a different sort. Previously, we covered the collapse of Diamond comic distributors and how the goods in their warehouses have been seized by the liquidators, and tabletop games and comic book companies are being caught up in that. Dynamite last week was going to struggle to pay staff. This week, Green Ronin Publishing has a GoFundMe to secure legal representation and fight that in court. If you have dollars spare to donate, you can find the links on Geek Native and via the show notes. On the blog this week, we talked to Tove and Eric of Midnight Tower about the Adventurer's Guide to Eastern Farraway. This book is finally on Kickstarter, smashing the funding goal, and follows years of adventures from Midnight Tower, all of which are set in the low fantasy but 5e realm of Eastern Farraway. In the interview, we touch on D&D games without whimsy, the Scandinavian influences in their game, and the journey Midnight Tower has been on. I also talked to Patrick and Dominic of Cubicle 7 about Warhammer, the Old World. This new Warhammer TTRPG is set 240 years before Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, but as we unearthed in the interview, a crossover feels inevitable. Other indie RPG news this week comes from Daniel D. Fox, known for Zweihander, who has announced Nocturne. Nocturne feels different as it's grim in the gothic sense and rules light. It's more Poe than Lovecraft or jump scares. And in the other corner on the blog, there's a preview of Adventuring Family, which is a newish TTRPG from a small team of teachers, psychologists and psychotherapists, and designed to be a family therapy for kids who have certain challenges. Before we get on to the news from the big end of the TTRPG pool, I did want to touch on Porcupine Publishing being bold and perhaps too bold. They have published the TTRPG Bear Grylls Gone Wild. That caught my attention as Bear Grylls is a TV celeb, and while I have not seen his shows, I know they're about wilderness and survival tips. I didn't think they maybe had the rights to him. And then, as I read the blurb, I realised the game was about Bear Grylls kidnapping co-host Holly Wilbury and the PCs trying to rescue her. Now, Holly is another TV celeb who, unfortunately, is the victim of a real-life attempted kidnapping and stalking. It's possible that Porcupine didn't know that, or I guess maybe I'm being too sensitive, but I wonder if this was a wise game to release. What do you think? And now, what about that news from the corporate end of the tabletop hobby that I promised? Dungeons & Dragons has a new boss. His name is Dan Ayub, and he's ex-Microsoft, and he was at Halo while it was good. Dan isn't just a new boss, but he is the boss of it all, as D&D is becoming a franchise model. In other words, Dan sits at the top of a pyramid which will include merch deals, computer games, comics, TV and books. Wizards of the Coast didn't really shine light on that it wasn't already set up like this before. And I just have to guess that maybe the computer game companies previously had more leeway. An example of why this might not have been a good idea comes from the expensive failure of Sigil, WotC's attempt at a VTT, which never really seemed to get the tabletop game's vibe at all. And that's not all though, because ex-Wizards of the Coast Marcom's Vice President Jess Lanslow has popped up as at World of Darkness, and she will now be the creative director. I think that's a slightly different role from her than previously, although I'm sure she's had lots of exposure to creative directors from her Adland days and even at Wizards of the Coast. It's certainly a power hire move from the newly remade White Wolf. Lastly, in our outro section, we have 3 squared bundles. I say that because the first one, GURPS and Pyramid, is a set of 3 in itself over at the Bundle of Holding. If you're looking to get a truckload of downloads and are interested in one of the original generic RPG systems, it's worth checking out. The other Bundle of Holding deal is for the Dark Eye, an English language bundle for a TTRPG that has outsold D&D in Germany in previous years. Lastly, and with a few days left on the clock at Humble, there's a Numenera collection. This game is set 1 billion years in the future, with technology regressed, and yet with nanites everywhere to give the illusion of magic. That's a wrap. Keep safe, stick it to the man, and I'll see you next week.